Okay, so if you can't tell, I am filming on my phone. And I lost like 2 videos I had editing because of them being on my other phone and then having to get a new phone, and they didn't transfer over. So I'm sorry for this background, but I have to face the light now because the lighting on this is different than the lighting on my camera. And I hope that this mic is okay. But I'm gonna film my wrap up for November and tell you what I read and what I liked and what I hated, because it was kind of a weird month, and I just want to get this out there. But I have everything written down. I didn't have any DNFs, which is good. Normally there's always at least one DNF. You know, if you've been watching them, I usually have one DNF and it's usually pretty bad. The first book I read was Tempting Hades by Emma Hamm. This book was okay. It definitely wasn't the best. I think the thing that I didn't like about it was I feel like it wasn't what it should have been for a Hades and Persephone retelling, which is what it was. Hades wasn't dark enough. He wasn't mysterious enough. He was very much a super watered down Hades. And I didn't like that. I feel like if you're going to go with like King, Lord of the Underworld, like the darkest of the dark, you can't like water that down to be like, well, but he's a really nice guy. He could have been nice with her, but he shouldn't just be like, somebody were like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, it's just Hades. And that's how it felt through the whole book. And the story was very interesting, had a lot of interesting Greek mythology, but where I felt like the story really faltered was the actual relationship of Hades and Persephone, because it just wasn't that interesting. So this was like a 2-star read for me. I have read other books by Emma Hamm. They are very hit and miss for me. Nothing against her at all. I just think for me, sometimes her books are clean, sometimes they're not. It can be you just don't know what you're getting. And this one was not the cleanest, but I mean, I will say it was pretty toned down for what I thought with the Hades and Persephone retelling. And yeah, it was just not that good. The next book I read was Fangs by Anna Catmore, and I have read a lot of books by this author too, and I will say this was not the best. I did like it. It's a vampire book about a vampire that is actually taking over for Dracula, but he doesn't want to like be trained to do all the like vampire things. I swear my face is not this much darker than my neck. It's like the light hitting me. I'm gonna cut this. Maybe I should wear a scarf. I swear this like is not that much difference. Bothering me. Okay, sorry. So Fangs is about a vampire that is being trained to take over for Lord Dracula. It's his like last heir. And he's going to learn all the vampire things, or else Dracula is gonna basically be like, nope, you're not taking over for me. So he doesn't know how to like control humans through like compulsion, and he doesn't know how to like make things burst into flame. He can't use any of his vampire powers. He basically just has humans around and feeds off of them, and like he doesn't kill them, but he's basically just lived this like privileged vampire life. And then he gets sent to the home of the original Dracula, Transylvania, and meets a girl there, and of course there's like a relationship, and it was okay. There was werewolves and vampires in this story, and it was fine. It was just a very like teen romancy vampire story, and it was like well written enough. But if you're going to read anything by this author, I definitely recommend her Neverland series. It's one of the better Peter Pan retellings I've ever found, and I do really like it. That was like a 3-star read. So then I have A Prince for Little Red Riding Hood, also by Anna Catmore. Here's the thing with this author. I feel like she treads the line of, like, all of her books are clean, technically, but the thought process and conversation is not. So, like, the characters might never engage in any behaviors that you're like, oh, whoa, like, I didn't see that coming. But the talk is very much that they want to. And you're like, you are still having to hear it all, so you might as well just, And I feel like this one definitely was much more in that line where the wolf character, so the Prince for Little Red Riding Hood. So in this story, all of the characters have to act out their stories. So every time a kid opens a book to read Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf and Little Red Riding Hood have to be in the story, and they go and act out the story together. So they're stuck in their fairy tale together. And of course, Little Red Riding Hood's looking at all of her friends, Cinderella and Snow White, and she's like, well, I don't have a prince, and that's not fair. So this is about her wanting to break out of her story and find her prince. And of course, then the wolf character being like, but we're like a thing. I mean, we're not a thing, but you know, you're in my story and I don't want to lose you. And kind of going on from there. So it was okay. If you don't want to read smutty talk, I don't know how else to say it. Like, it's just, I mean, it's like, yeah, I didn't want to read it, and it was kind of annoying that it was thrown in. And it's like, you know, not all throughout, but just a few spots where you're like, okay, I don't care that he's thinking that, but okay, thank you. And I get that this is a wolf character, so she was trying to make him seem very like morally gray because he's like a werewolf and sometimes he has to eat people in the story. So I know, just not the best. I think it was like 3 stars for me. And then I read another book by the same author, Julian, which is a small spoiler, a story about a angel, which I don't think it's like, if you see the cover of the book, you would know. This is about a guy who is an angel who meets a girl. And this is actually, he's basically kind of an angel of death. And he comes to help this girl's mom and like finish up her business so that she can die peacefully. And of course, he ends up falling in love with the daughter. And then, of course, you know, it's like they can't really be together, can they? And, you know, a lot of the book is centered around her figuring out who he is and stuff. Once again, it was okay. Nothing really wonderful about it, nothing really wrong with it. It was very teen and probably not, I'm not like the audience this is intended for. I thought that it was like kind of something I've already read before. There are a lot of books with angel characters like this, but it was okay. 3 stars. And then I read Edenbrooke, which, hang on, I have that book. Edenbrooke. I read Edenbrooke next, and I love this book. This was a recommendation from a friend off of Bookstagram, and this book is great. Now, I will say I do not rate these Regency era romance books on the same scale I rate a high fantasy novel. It's not the same. I have a scale for how I rate things, and if you're ever interested, I will tell you what my like rating scale is. But basically, this was 5 stars for me for this genre. I love the characters. I felt like the plot pace was really good. I was very interested, and the romance was very, very sweet. And I was invested in it. I read it very quickly. It took me like a couple hours, and I was all about it. So, recommend. I loved Edenbrooke. I am trying to read, she has another novel called Blackmore, which I also have, and it's not gripping me quite the same way, but I do think it's because of the type of romance. This is very much a like, they can't really be together. She meets this guy, and then she realized like her sister kind of has a claim on him, and you know, and her sister has always gotten what she wants. And so as much as I don't like the whole like good bad sister thing, at least in this it was done pretty well. And I did think that I like this was worth it to like, you know, the whole story was really good. And it didn't play up the whole like one sister's so evil and selfish. Like it didn't really play up that. It was like, you know, this sister just happened to meet this guy, and in that time she really thought like, oh, I have this claim on him because I'm, you know, I know him and I'm like with the family and I've got this in, and so of course he's going to want to be with me. So it wasn't like she was evil. I mean, not really. She just was kind of thoughtless. Sisters can be like that. So I did do some NetGalley books, and it's just as good a time as any to talk about them. I have not done this before. One of them was a like kids book called Anne's School Days, which I will put here, and just kind of like a short story from the Anne of Green Gables universe, if you will. It's like her meeting Gilbert and their first little interactions together, and it was cute. I would say if you're like introducing a very young reader to Anne of Green Gables, it'd be perfect. There's not much for me to say about that. I'm not going to really even rate it because it's not for me. It was like, I have kids, so I had to look at it like, would my kids like this? And I think, yes, they would. It was really cute. The illustrations were really good, and so I would recommend it. The other book that I got that I hated was Instant Karma, and this was an audiobook. Nothing to do with the narrator. The narrator was really good. I'll put her name here. but the story was atrocious. I hated Instant Karma so much. And this is an author whose series, The Lunar Chronicles, I love, but Instant Karma is hot trash. I could not stand that book. I was so mad at the main character, who is horrifically unlikable. I would call her a Karen in training. She is the type of person who looks around for people not doing the things she thinks are right and then feels like she should be able to enact justice on them. And it was horrifying. Not what our society needs right now. We don't need more Karens. And this girl was so terrible. And I get that she was a teen, and teens generally have this idea that this is a generalization. Not all teenagers are like this. I was a teenager and I was like this. When you're a teen, you think you know everything. You think you're always right. I did. Like it just is. But this girl was awful. And the enemies to lover relationship, I just kept thinking, geez, this guy does not deserve you. Like, was he done? He does not deserve you. You are so awful. Like, he's not that bad. And everything that she said about him, and when she would complain about him, and it was so insane how she was so self-unaware. Like, she had no self-awareness of, like, she was actually awful. And so we go through, like, they have this school project together. She's very angry with him because she feels like he didn't contribute. He doesn't take things as seriously as she does. No one takes things as seriously as she does. Okay? I am a serious person. And this girl annoyed the heck out of me. And then they get a bad grade on the project. And so they are forced over the summer to kind of try and work together again. And she realizes, of course, like, small spoiler, like, he's not trash. He's not this person who's just ignoring all his responsibilities. He works at an animal rescue. And the other thing I'll say that didn't work for me with this book was I care about animals. I live on the coast, very near the coast, about an hour away. Okay, so I live near the coast and love animals. I love marine animals. I go to, see them whenever I can, and there's places around me you can see whales, and it's wonderful. But this book's messaging on that was pretty heavy-handed, and not in a way that made me like it or feel like it was like, oh yeah, that's a good message. Just made me feel like, haven't we already said that? Are we like it? I just didn't like how it was so blatant, and it's like, you can, like, I like animals. Yes, you should protect animals. Yes, you should take care of the ocean. Like, all these things are good, but the messaging didn't feel like it was subtle, like it was nuanced. It was just, look, here's an animal with a straw, a sea turtle with straws shoved up its nose. Like, I don't need that 20 times in a book. I don't. I just don't need it. It didn't do anything for me as a reader, and it just felt like the author kept wanting to hammer it home. And the other thing was the vegan character being so awful. Like, if you want to promote veganism, don't make the characters the type of person that gets in people's face and yells at them for not being vegan. That will not win people over. I don't know what the author's thoughts are on veganism, but I'm like, oh good, make the vegan character the least likable character, like, besides the MC. That's all been your cause. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Instant Karma, I would pass on. I was like a 1-star read, and that was mainly because I am not an audiobook fan, but the narrator was did very well. There was not an issue with me not liking the person narrating. I've had issues with that before, but this was not one of them. The narrator was quite good. So I would definitely check out her if she's done other audiobooks. Check her out, because it's an awful book. I feel bad for her. Okay, so then I read Songs for Libby, which is by Annette K. Larson, and I have read a few of her, I'll put it here, contemporary romances. This one is very stereotypical. Best friends, one of them becomes famous, and then they kind of grow apart because fame changes him. He's the one who becomes famous, and she is always trying to be there for him, but he has substance abuse issues, and she has to walk away. And then, of course, later in life, they meet back up, and there is a relationship. This was fine. Nothing wrong with it. I would say 3 stars. I have enjoyed books by her more. This one, I think, for me, the subject matter just is not that interesting. I am not a big Hollywood person, so, like, the life of the rich and famous doesn't, like, have that pull for me of, like, oh, well, of course you'd want to be with him. He's a star. I'm like, oh, no, run away. That's not going to be good for you in the future. Like, those relationships never last. sorry, I'm a realist, so it was less romantic for me. But the story was cute. He's like a big he's a big music star, and so of course, like, she inspires his songs, and it's sweet. And there are, I will say, if you are sensitive, spoiler and possible trigger warning, if you're sensitive to quite a few people dying in books, quite a few people die in these books to kind of pave the way for this relationship to move forward. I don't mean that in a mean way, but I felt like the author was really trying to hammer home that they were like brought together by like mutual tragedies, and that was why he got so messed up and kind of what brought them together, but then ended up eventually driving them apart. So, sorry, I'm not used to sitting like this. So that was Songs for Libby, like 3 stars for that one. And then I read Sherlock Holmes, I can't think. The Sign of Four and A Study in Scarlet. So this is actually an audiobook done by Stephen Fry. Super good, highly recommend. The Sherlock Holmes stories were interesting. I will say, if you've never read A Study in Scarlet, it's a trip. Like, I was not prepared for where that went. I'm like, what? And I can't even say why, because it would be such a spoiler to the story. But if you're looking for a Sherlock Holmes story that's really going to just take a turn into a really weird direction, Study in Scarlet, I recommend. I was entertained by these stories. I would say if you're reading them through 2020 lens, you probably will not like them. They're dated in their references to people and cultures and religion and all of that. So this is not a defense of that. I'm just saying this is a true fact. I like the relationship between Sherlock and John Watson. I like kind of the exploration of his mind and him as a person, and just like his, detective work. And I think that the stories are very interesting, especially how they wrap up. And The Sign of Four was really good too. So The Sign of Four, I would say, is definitely a more traditional like detective story. It's much more straightforward than The Study in Scarlet, but I liked and enjoyed both. And I think a lot of that has to do with the narrator. I've definitely read some Sherlock Holmes on my own, but the Audible book is just really, really good. And I would recommend, which I never listen to audiobooks, but here we are. So the last book I read, Crown of Midnight, which is the first book in the Court of Midnight series. I'll put it here, by K.M. Shea. Of course, this is 5 stars for me. I am a gigantic K.M. Shea fan. She's one of my favorite authors, if not my favorite contemporary, like favorite not dead author. She's great. This series is a spinoff from her Hall of Blood and Mercy series, and deals with the character that is introduced in the Hall of Blood and Mercy. So this story is following Layla, and she is very different and somewhat similar to the main character from A Hall of Blood and Mercy. But I liked her character a lot because she is Fae, and we get introduced to the Fae courts and their politics and everything that's going on there. And I'm a huge fan of that. I love stories about Fae. And also we get introduced to a very intriguing Fae assassin who is, of course, going to be set up as her love interest. And I was here for it. Like, I was definitely like, yes, him. For sure, him. I'm hoping we get a lot more of their relationship in the next couple of books. The next book comes out this month, and I will definitely be reading it and reviewing it. So I will just say, wait for that. But I love, love, love this series and where it's starting out. And I thought the story, kind of going through her realizing who she is and her place in the Night Court, and then having to deal with their politics. And Fae are very interesting depending on how you are writing about them. And I felt like it was, she's half Fae, half human. So she's going at it with growing up in the human world and then having to live with all the Fae, and how different it is, and how she sees them as being like, whoa, you're messed up, but she's also half human. And so they're looking at her like, oh, you're just, you're like tainted. But it was great. I like it a lot, and great introduction to a new series, and I'm excited to see what else happens. So those are all the books I read in November. I started to keep track of all the books I read when I started my Bookstagram in March. So I'm at 92 from March to end of November, hoping to read 8 books in December to make it to 100. I'll let you know. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Tell me what you've been reading and talk to me in the comments. I am so sorry for this setup. I'll try and get back to something better soon.